Stan the Fan from Pressbox and PressBoxOnline.com, along with my partner Gary Stein. And joining us tonight on our Zoom interview is none other than Kevin Cowherd, author, former Baltimore Sun columnist, both sports and on the general news side. But Kevin, how long has it been since you left the Sun?
I took a buyout, guys, in 2013. So almost 7 years. It'll be 7 years in July.
And since then, you've kind of been able to reinvent yourself. And I'll hold up the book that we're going to get into. It's When the Crowd Didn't Roar, which just came out a little over a year ago, Kevin. But you've reinvented yourself as an author of books.
Well, Stan, I had been doing books with Cal Ripken before that. So I had done a number of baseball novels for young readers with Cal. So that started, about 5 years before I left the Sun. So I've, since that time, I've been pretty steadily churning out books. Yep.
Hey, Kevin, do you think that, and I always admired your work, and we've had you on the Inside Press Box show quite often, and I think we've had this conversation before about your work, but do you think the fact that you were not really only a sports writer, but also more of a general writer, you had a knowledge and a love just to ask questions and find out about things, not only sports, do you think that helped you when it came to writing books later in your career?
Oh, I don't think there's any question, Gary. I loved my time, 22 years in the feature section of the Baltimore Sun. It was a great place to work, guys, because they let you do anything. I started my career in Baltimore in '81 as a sports writer until '86, and then went over to the feature section. So it gave me a good look at both sides of the paper. I think it made me a more well-rounded writer, to your point, Gary. So I think, yes, that absolutely helped. The more experience you get in different types of writing, especially for a newspaper, the better a reporter and writer you'll be.
I mean, is it fair to say, Kevin, all those years that you were writing sports for the Sun, I mean, were you a hits and runs guy? Like it's not that you didn't care about the result, but did you just love being there and writing about people and personalities as opposed to runs, points, touchdowns, etc.?
Absolutely. You hit it right on the head, Gary. I was all about the people in sports. Right. If you give me 2 or 3 paragraphs full of statistics, this guy's batting average, OPS, I'm going to fall asleep on you. I don't like it. To me, it's all about the people who play the sports, how they react in big moments, how they fail in big moments, how they win in big moments. Those were always the elements of sports that I loved the most. So I always wanted to get as close to the people that I would report on as I could, to find out what they were thinking, get inside their head a little bit. And that was everything. That was the main thing that I loved about sports writing.
Kevin, I want to spin back to the book. April 2015, Baltimore City Police have a guy named Freddie Gray in their custody, and we don't know exactly what happened, but he was essentially killed. Whether it was intentional, unintentional, but we didn't have a videotape of that. But we had unrest, which led to the game at Orioles Park at Camden Yards, the first of its kind, a game with no fans. How long after that game took place did Kevin Cowherd say, hey, this is an idea for a book?
It's a great question, Stan. I was downtown when the rioting, the unrest, whatever word you want to use, started. And I would say 3 or 4 days later, after watching this bizarre Orioles White Sox game in lockdown Camden Yards, you got to remember, guys, there were National Guard troops in the streets. There were the smell of burned buildings and charred cars wherever you were. We had tanks going through West Baltimore, tanks. It was such a bizarre, to me, it was like a Shakespearean tragedy, guys. So, it was so bizarre, so surreal a setting for a baseball game. any event for that matter, that quickly, 2 or 3 days after that, Stan, I was already thinking, boy, this was a great book. And then, I thought I needed to think about it and to think about how I was going to set it up. And I didn't approach the Orioles on it until the following year. But yeah, I mean, I started thinking about it right away. It was you talk about a drama that was, perfect for a book-length treatment, I thought.
So I guess Gary will pull the thread that I'm doing here. So at that time, what made this a special book is it's the first time it's ever happened. Right. And now it's 5 years after the event, and the entire sports world may play seasons right now. And by seasons, I don't mean baseball 3 seasons. I mean the 2020 baseball season, the end of the basketball season, the football season, college football. They may play without fans in the stands. You were really ahead of its time. Has it brought back a lot of attention to the book, I guess I'm asking?
It's brought back some attention, but, it's just such a sad time for everybody, guys. I mean, the idea, in our lifetimes, we've never had a time without sports. It's so bizarre, especially as a guy who loves baseball and who counted on the rhythms of baseball to get summer. Every Oriole game that was on TV, I'd watch. If I wasn't covering it, I'd be watching it or listening to it on the radio. So to me, this is such a bizarre time. And yes, it does bring the idea that any of these sports would attempt to play these games without fans. I can't see how they're going to do it. They're going to have to convince me that they can pull this thing off, especially in the middle of a global pandemic. And right now, I'm not sold on it. I love the idea that Major League Baseball keeps coming up with a plan. The Major League Baseball Players Association has a counter plan. Nothing's happening there. Right. The NBA now looks like it's moving a little closer to formulating a plan for them to play in Disney World or something like that.
Right.
But to me, the idea, without fans, guys, it's such an essential element to the game. And I'm not sure I can believe that they're going to be able to pull this thing off.
I would agree, Kevin. Stan and I have done these Zoom talks, over the last few weeks with a myriad of people from around professional sports and baseball, particularly. And I've said that multiple times. I actually think baseball is doing a disservice to itself by going through with this plan. But I wanted to stay with the book for a second, Kevin, and I wanted to ask you, the subtitle of the book is basically how the game, I'm talking about the fanless game in 2015, the Orioles and the White Sox, how the game helped mend a broken city. How did it help mend a broken city?
Well, a lot of people have asked me about that title, and a lot of people have said they disagree with the subtitle of the book. And what I would say about that, guys, is you got to remember that subtitle was written about 2 years after the game itself. And the hope that I was referring to, Gary, was the idea that after that game, there was a sense that Baltimore was finally starting to heal. There had been 2 days without unrest, 2 days without violence, 2 days without protests and without violent protests in the streets. And so there was a sense of, hey, we were actually playing baseball down there. It's a bizarre baseball game. It's behind locked gates at Camden Yards, but it's baseball. And there was a sense that the community was finally coming together again and that the worst of the violence was over. So that was the hope that I was referring to. Now, 2 or 3 years after that, Baltimore is in a tough place. We've had a lot of scandals. We've had police problems. We have had mayoral changes. We have had all sorts of, mayors with scandals. So that hope that I was referring to was fleeting. But you have to remember that was, when I was thinking about that, was immediately after that game in 2015.
By the way, that exact subtitle is How Baseball's Strangest Game Ever Gave a Broken City Hope. Again, the book title is When the Crowd Didn't Roar. I just need to pick up on something Gary was asking you and just ask you to be kind of current right now. Was Freddie Gray really George Floyd without the video?
Yeah, you'll recall, both men, of course, died from injuries suffered in police custody. There was the video. The video was very damning in the George Floyd case, obviously.
Right.
There was no video in Freddie Gray's case. And remember, those officers were eventually acquitted. And then finally, Marilyn Mosby dropped the charges against the rest of the officers. So we don't know what happened in that police van. You know, when we do have video that initially the police leading Freddie Gray into the van, at that point, he looks like there's something really wrong with him, guys. He's got, you know, he's shuffling his feet. He looks like he's injured. He's severely injured. Police have maintained they did not give him a rough ride. A rough ride is basically putting him in the back of that paddy wagon without any restraints and you know, going around corners too fast and hoping that the guy in there bangs his head. The prisoner bangs his head or hurts himself. The police sworn testimony was they did not do that. So yeah, we don't know exactly what happened to Freddie Gray. We didn't have video. This video of the George Floyd case is just absolutely damning and horrible. It's just
very hard to watch. Very hard to watch.
Very hard to watch, and look what it's led to, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, just, you know, it's led to an entire country erupting in protest.
Kevin, let's stay with that, what we're talking about, because it's so topical and current. I want to really get to the nexus of sports journalism and politics. I think it's interesting that you left the Baltimore Sun in 2013. I did my last sports radio talk show in 2013. And I remember in 2013, which was really only 6 or 7 years ago now, that I brought up a political point in one of my last shows, and I was criticized for mixing sports and politics. This was just 7 years ago, okay? Look ahead now today, 7 years later, anywhere you turn, ESPN, any sports talk radio, any television, any newspaper, anything you read that has to do with sports, there seems to be a political element in it. And I wonder if you think this is a good state of sports journalism. Is this good for sports journalism, or is it just inevitable because of the times that we're in?
Or just necessary because of the times we're in?
You know, but to answer your question, Gary, I mean, sports and politics are inextricably bound today. This country is so politically divided, it's so culturally divided that even sports gets caught up in that.
Right.
I don't think you can be a sports writer, a sports personality for a radio station or TV station and think, I'm just going to talk about sports. That's all I'm going to talk about. That's all I'm going to report. Those days are over, guys. This is a whole different. We have to see the link between sports and politics. It's not going away. It's only going to get worse, in my opinion. And I'm not sure that's the right word, that it's getting worse. I think it's just, that's what we have to deal with.
Kevin, did you see the column the other day? I apologize. There's two female reporters, columnists for the Washington Post. I think it was Christine Brennan wrote the piece about two knees, comparing Colin Kaepernick's knee to the officer who has been now upgraded to a second-degree murder charge, and saying, look at what's happened since these two knees in between, and how much egg on the face the NFL seems to have now. The commissioner came out immediately after George Floyd's murder, and I'll call it murder, and sort of said how horrible it is and all that. And now protesters and police officers and National Guardsmen are taking a knee as a symbol of sort of peace and some a symbol of hope. Yeah. You know, it's just fascinating to me how the NFL's posture is entirely different now towards its players than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, I didn't read that column, Stan. If it was by Chris Brennan, she's a terrific columnist.
Yeah.
Sally Jenkins is also a great columnist for.
It was Christine Brennan. It was Christine. Yeah.
Chris Brennan.
Yeah.
No, I didn't see it, but yes, I mean, it's just amazing now that we have police officers, we have politicians taking a knee now in solidarity with the protesters today. That's what Kaepernick was doing at the time. Of course, when he did this, he was criticized. He was considered anti-American, unpatriotic. And he tried to point out this was solely, he was protesting the treatment by the police. That's all he was protesting. And yet they painted him as this deranged guy who hates his country, hates his people, hates his team. And that, yeah, you're right, though. It's funny now to see all these people kneeling and almost in solidarity. And you wonder, I wonder if Kaepernick is going to a long interview. I'd love to know his thoughts on what's happening now.
Hey, Kevin, if we could turn the page on it real quick. Hey, no pun intended. The books that you wrote.
I've often referred to everything Kevin writes as a page turner. You know?
The books that you
You're
wrote.
right, my book.
I'm curious about Cal because, it's almost been 20 years since Cal retired. And it's been, 25 years since
25 since he broke the record. Yeah,
I mean, we're going on 2 generations now. It's hard to even imagine because, he grew up with us,
Right. Right.
How do you think young people, and it's interesting that he wrote books for young kids, how do young kids view Cal Ripken? What do they really know about Cal Ripken?
Well, I think what they know, Gary, is what their parents tell them about him. I don't think Cal is, they don't know that much about Cal. It's all, the parents have to explain everything to them. I think they realize he's a baseball icon. They realize how much their parents admire and even revere Cal Ripken in this town. But, he's still of a different generation of them. I mean, I just remember, my childhood hero was Willie Mays. Okay. Sure. But I remember, within 10 years, no one else, my people who were younger than me, they didn't know much about Willie Mays. I had to explain what a great baseball player, center field Hall of Famer he was. So I think that's the same situation with Cal. It's just, I think, kids today don't know as much about him, but their parents certainly do. And anybody who grew up in Baltimore, who worked in the media like you, me and Stan did, we know what Cal has meant to the sport, and we know what Cal's meant to Baltimore.
Kevin, piggybacking on a discussion about Cal Ripken, we lost an iconic figure in Baltimore sports this past week in Wes Unseld passing away. I know the timing of your Sun career, probably you didn't bump into him all that much, but you have to understand about what he meant to this town and what this town meant to him and his wife with the Unseld School. Your thoughts on Wes Unseld?
I only met him a few times. I got to talk to him a few times, Stan. Great individual. Let me first talk about his basketball career. I thought the guy was so underrated, it was ridiculous. Part of that was his size. He was a 6'7" guy going up against people like Jabbar and Willis Reed and people like that. But, no one threw an outlet pass better than himself. We all know that. There's no question.
Nobody like it at all. Yeah.
Yeah. No question he deserves to be in the NBA Hall of Fame. As though he was terrific. He made the Washington franchises, the Bullets and the Wizards, what they were. I never thought he was the greatest coach in the world, but I thought he related to his peers so well. He wasn't a guy, he was a gentle guy. He wasn't a hard-ass type of guy. I appreciated that. So many of these coaches, especially in the NBA, they try to be, in the NFL too, to a lesser extent. They're hard-edged guys. Wes was never like that. And to your point, what he did for kids here in Baltimore through the school with his wife, he was revered here in Baltimore, and he's revered the way Cal Ripken is revered. There's no question about it. A terrific man. And I knew he had been in health for the last few years, but his death was still, in my opinion, pretty sudden. I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah. Let's go from that thread, basketball, to your next endeavor is writing a book about UMBC's improbable win versus Virginia a couple of years back. How did this come about?
I thought there was another great story, guys, and a story that really resonated here in Baltimore, obviously. But, if you go back to that time, UMBC for that weekend, we knocked off Virginia. They were the talk of sports. They were on Sports Center constantly. They were on all sorts of news programs. They were the number topic trending on Twitter. UMBC, this heretofore sleepy commuter school, right?
My alma mater. My alma mater.
Yes, and it, a school that turned out PhDs and a terrific school academically, but one certainly not known for athletic achievement. So I just, again, it was right away. I said, this is a book, and I actually waited about 4 or 5 months before approaching UMBC about that. They were happy to have a book written about that wonderful, magical season. So to me, it was another no-brainer. That's going to be, I think it's going to be a good story to tell.
Yeah. Well, as you both know, I do the play-by-play for UMBC basketball.
Yeah.
And John Feinstein is my partner. We had literally had a courtside seat for that season, the season before, the season after, etc. So there are so many stories to talk about. But Kevin, as you continue to research the book and talk to the right people, I'm sure you'll come across the story, if you haven't already, the connection that Dr. Freeman Hrabowski, the president of UMBC and one of the greatest educators in the country, had with the star player Juris Lyles. And Freeman was really a big reason why Juris Lyles even came back for his senior season, because he was thinking of transferring to a bigger school to finish out his career. And as they say, the rest is history for UMBC.
Yeah, no question. Juris told me a number of interviews with him. He told me that he was very, very happy when he first to UMBC, because he was, you may recall that he had played for Virginia Tech, not for long. Robert Morris, for a cup of coffee, didn't even play for them. And so when he ended up at UMBC, Gary, he was so happy, because here was a school, A, that had a scholarship available for him, and B, that really wanted him, that courted him. So he was very happy his first year here. Then he made up his mind. Do I want to stay at this program? Do I want to go to a Power 5 conference? And ultimately, Ryan Odom, the coach of UMBC, suggested he go talk to Freeman Hrabowski, the president of the school. Juris did that. And it's not that Dr. Hrabowski convinced him to stay there, but he said all the right things. And one of the things he said that really resonated with Juris was, he said, look, you can go Power 5 school. You have the talent to play on a school like that. But if you stay here in a mid-major program like we have here, you're going to leave a legacy. You're going to create
Absolutely.
A legacy. You're going to leave a legacy.
Hit it on the head.
And that was ultimately what convinced Juris to stay. And he told me, you know what, he was leaning to staying anyway, but that conversation with Ryan Odom, but also the conversation with Dr. Hrabowski, convinced him, and he was thrilled, and he loves the school, and he's so happy that he stayed.
Before we sign off, I told you a story, Kevin, that Gary had relayed to me about a year and a half ago, that Coach Ryan Odom felt so strongly about how that loss to Virginia may have impacted the young men on that Virginia squad, that as they got ready to play in the tournament the following season, Gary, you tell me if I'm right or wrong, he asked Coach Tony Bennett if he minded writing a letter to the team to say, hey, there's no disgrace in losing in a big upset, and you never know that your lowest moment can set you up for your highest moment. And that's, in fact, what that loss may have done. It set Virginia up to win the tournament a year later.
It absolutely did. I had not heard that story, Stan. I'm glad you told me. It's something I'm definitely going to talk to Ryan about. But that's Ryan. So tell me, could there be two classier guys than Ryan Odom and Tony Bennett? As far as the way they comport themselves,
Yep.
how they coach their teams, how they talk to their players. I mean, that's. I was not surprised, Gary, when Stan told me that story the other day. And as I say, I definitely want to ask Ryan about it. Doesn't surprise me in the least, because that's Ryan Odom. He's just, he told me, I asked him at one point, why do you coach? And he said, I don't coach for wins and losses. I'm coaching these kids, and hopefully I'm helping them in some way realize some of their dreams, and maybe they'll turn out to be, better people than they first came here. And that's his thing. So interesting story, and I'm definitely going to follow up on that, guys.
All right, Kevin Cowherd. Kevin, I sense a theme that you look for great stories. Hopefully after you write the UMBC book, Gary, you'll see that Gary and I have taken this Zoom video thing, and you'll write a book about us doing these Zoom video interviews.
And it'll probably be a bestseller, Stan.
The book that's still out. It's only a year old, little over a year old. When the Crowd Didn't Roar, How Baseball's Strangest Game Ever Gave a Broken City Hope. We hope you'll pick up a copy and read it. Kevin, thank you so much for an interesting interview.
All right. See you, Stan. See you, Gary. And thanks for having me, guys.
You got it.
Take care. Until next time.
Right.
Pressbox and PressBoxOnline.com. I'm Stan the Fan. He's Gary Stein.